Okay, so welcome everybody to the backpacking section educational event. Tonight we have Steve Frank talking about the big four, reducing your pack weight. I think somebody is not muted. So Steve is a CMC and a backpacking section trip leader. Thank you, Steve. And he's also co-director of the backpacking school. He's a self-proclaimed gearhead, and he spent the last 15 years researching and trying out the latest trends in lightweight backpacking gear. So, wonderful person to talk to us this evening. He backpacks year round, and he also climbs Colorado's high peaks. He snowshoes, cross-country skis, and likes to do photography. So I think we're going to hear some really good information from Steve tonight. So Steve, I'll hand over to you and thank you very much.
All right. Just confirming you can see the presentation. Okay, it's coming through.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
All right. Let me move the Zoom out of the way so I can see my slides. And we'll get going. So we're going to be talking about reducing your pack weight, focusing on the big four. And the presentation I'm going to give tonight is of a little bit of what we cover in backpacking school, but you all are all experienced backpackers, so it's mostly going to be beyond what we focus on in backpacking school. It's kind of backpacking school's introduction to backpacking and kind of like getting you going. And this is, okay, you've got some experience. What are some next steps that that you might be able to take to on your journey to get your pack weight down, assuming that you're targeting longer miles, bigger days, that kind of thing. So what are the big four? Well, the big four are your backpack, your tent or shelter, your sleeping bag, and your sleeping pad. Sometimes you'll hear these referred to as the big three, with the sleeping bag and pad combined into a sleep system. Why do we care about these especially? Well, we care about these because the big four items are, something like 40 to 70% of your base weight, and everything else that you take along is maybe 30 to 60%. So these items are where you're going to have the most bang for your buck if you are looking at how do I, get my weight down. So we pay special attention to these because they're heavy. If you don't recall what your base weight is, basically that is the weight of all the gear that you need to spend the day and night in the wilderness, minus the things that you consume, like food and water. And so, like I said, reducing the weight of these items is going to make the biggest impact overall on your total pack weight. So what are we going to talk about tonight? We basically are looking at two questions that this is kind of how I thought about the presentation. We're trying to answer two questions. One, what are recent weight saving advances in the big four items that you might or might not be aware of from the past 10 years or so? And then what factors should I consider if I want to replace some of my big four items, in an effort to reduce weight? So we're going to go through a number of advances that I think are important things that have happened in the backpacking gear world in the past decade. Some of these you may be aware of, some maybe not so much. And we'll talk about how they might impact your gear choices. So starting with shelter, we'll do a little background on each one, right? So what is your shelter for, right? Shelter is for protecting you from the environment, specifically when you're sleeping, but also possibly during the day if you are caught in weather or something like that, right? And within this category of shelter, there are many, 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 many shelter options. You can, have different shelter sizes, different shelter styles. You can have different fabrics, single wall, double wall, all sorts of things that we cover in backpacking school in terms of the variety of gear that's out there. Regardless of what your choice is, though, the kind of non-negotiables here are whatever shelter that you choose, it needs to fit your body, needs to be long enough for you, wide enough for you, and it needs to give you adequate protection. Everything else is, convenience, style, weight, all of those other things are kind of negotiable, but these are the non-negotiables. So assuming that you're working within those parameters, you still have lots and lots of options. So in backpacking school, we talk about three different main categories of shelters. They're kind of hybrids between these two, but we talk about, the shelter that most people have is a freestanding tent, also known as a dome or an arch tent. So this is kind of like your typical backpacking tent. And then kind of moving down in the weight range, you have trekking pole tents. These are typically non-freestanding, and they use your trekking poles for support. And then all the way at the very light end of the spectrum, you would have tarps, which you might pair with a bivy sack. So these are more open to the environment. This will shelter you from the rain, maybe not so much from the wind. So when we think about these, as you go toward the freestanding tent end, those tents are going to be easier to pitch, and they're generally going to offer you better protection. However, if you're looking to reduce weight, you're going the opposite direction toward the tarp and bivy sack. Of course, the difficulty with this is tarps are very difficult to pitch. They take a lot of practice, use a lot of stakes, a lot of guy line, take a lot of time. So is there something that's kind of a sweet spot? Well, in my opinion, yes, there is. The sweet spot is trekking pole shelters. And basically the idea here is you're probably carrying trekking poles anyway. Most people these days use a trekking pole, or at least one, and usually both. And if you are carrying them, why not use them for your tent? I mean, there's a few circumstances where you might not want to do that. If you need to leave your tent during the day, you're going to use your trekking poles for that. Well, then it's not the best choice. But assuming you're doing kind of a typical trip where you move and then you camp every night and you're taking your shelter with you, this can be a really good choice for saving weight. The downsides, as I mentioned, they're not freestanding typically compared to a dome or arch tent. It takes a little more practice to set up and usually have fewer features. However, the upside is that you could save a couple of pounds off of your tent weight. And there are many, many, many more of these shelters than there used to be. Even 3 or 4 years ago, there was just a handful of trekking pole shelters that were kind of the staples of the backpacking world. But now many brands offer them. I've kind of have a sampling here. And this is including big brands. REI and Big Agnes both offer trekking pole shelters as well now. So you can go and see them in person, in a store. These other brands that you see, Durston, Gossamer Gear, Z-Packs, Tarp Tent, these are all more cottage manufacturers. And within this category, we have a lot of variety as well. So they all kind of have the same basic 2 poles and configuration where you stake out the sides. But within that, there's different sizes, different geometries. You have both single and double wall shelters. So this double wall will have a layer of screen or mesh in between you and the outer wall. If that's something you want, you could find a trekking pole shelter that has that. In Colorado, these work quite well. I've been using a trekking pole shelter that's a single person trekking pole shelter for several years now. And before that, I was using a semi-freestanding tent. And in our climate, in the Colorado mountains, the soils are not typically that hard and compacted, and these work very well. If you are going someplace the soils are more hard and compacted, trekking pole shelters become harder to use because it's just harder to stake them out. And so then you might consider sticking with a regular dome tent. So that'd be something like going to the desert Southwest, for example. So this is kind of trend number 1. If you are looking at a tent replacement, I would encourage you to take a look at one of these. But even if you are not, in the past, 5 or so years, there's been quite a lot of advance in tent fabric materials, especially among small manufacturers that are making kind of, cottage gear, selling it online. Tent fabric's come a long way. It's lighter than it used to be. It is also stronger, and most of it's more environmentally friendly than it used to be as well. And so that all results in tents that are lower weight without compromising too much on performance. They are, however, more expensive. Some of the fabrics that you might look for out there on the left here is silicon coated polyester or sil poly. That's a quite economical fabric. It's low stretch, good waterproofness, and lasts really well. And a lot of manufacturers are making their more economy lines of tents out of sil poly. On the other hand, on the kind of the other end of the spectrum, you have these fabrics that are made out of ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. There's several versions of this, but basically the two that you'll see are Dyneema composite fabric, or DCF, or Ultra. And these are very light, completely waterproof, hydrophobic materials, also quite expensive. But you'll see a lot of thru hikers getting tents that use these because the weight savings is pretty substantial. And then on top of this, you also have big brands that are introducing their own proprietary fabrics. You know, Big Agnes and Nemo Equipment both have kind of newer fabrics out there. And what this adds up to is that in the tent world, even with conventional shelters, a tent that was manufactured in the last couple of years with some of these newer fabrics, you know, may weigh a pound or two less than the equivalent tent from several years back. So, you know, even if you are shopping kind of for a more conventional tent, you should take a look and see if there's one made with a fabric that could save you some weight. In both these cases, of course, you are looking at a new tent purchase, which can be pricey, but there are economy options out there, especially those that are made with the silicon coated polyester. Okay, so moving on to trends with sleep systems. Sleep system consists of the sleeping bag or quilt and the pad, and its purpose is to keep you warm and comfortable while sleeping. I think we all are familiar with that. There's some non-negotiables here too, just like with the other big four. It's got to fit your body, you know, in terms of length and width, just like your shelter does. And it needs to be adequately warm, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But within these parameters, again, you have some choices. There's not quite as much variety as there is with shelters. Really, there's kind of two styles of sleeping bags that are out there. First, you have the traditional mummy bag. We're all familiar with these. Most of you probably have one. But more and more popular are backpacking quilts. So these are a little bit different from bags. They can come in a closed toe box variety or an open toe box, kind of opens out into a blanket. They typically do not have hoods. And the way that they work is that they don't really have a back side either. The quilt goes over the top of you, and then your underlying insulation is your sleeping pad. And so why does this work? Well, your pad provides insulation. In a sleeping bag, typically all that down that you're laying on is compressed. It's not doing a whole lot for you in terms of insulation. So a quilt will eliminate that and just put the layer over the top of you instead. So why would we do this? Well, mainly because quilts weigh only 2/3 to a half of what a traditional mummy bag would weigh with equal warmth. So there's quite a bit of a weight saving advantage there. Of course, there are some downsides as well. A quilt is a little bit more finicky to use. The sizing is a little bit more critical to get right. And then they can be drafty if you don't know how to use them right. So, but let's say that you're interested, right? You want to explore this option. I'm going to go through kind of some of the options of quilts that are out there and what you might want to be looking for. So to start with, some of the quilt brands that I'm familiar with that are kind of reputable brands, have you know, earned a reputation in the backpacking, especially the ultralight community. So they're listed here, and each of these kind of has its own market niche. If you're really looking for an economy quilt, I would encourage you to look at Hammock Gear. They primarily make things for hammock campers, but they do offer a quilt that's versatile for both hammock or ground camping. And one notable thing about them is they're, you know, $100 or more lower in price than their competitors. So that's a good one if you're looking for a bargain without sacrificing too much in terms of quality or comfort. So you'll have this for reference later. Probably the other notable on here is Katabatic Gear. They're based out of Salida actually, because they are warmer than pretty much anything else on the market for their same temperature rating. So if you're going to select a quilt, it's a little bit different than selecting a sleeping bag. Uh, you need to pay a little bit more attention to kind of sizing and warmth. And so for sizing, you should check the manufacturer's guidance because typically they're going to provide good advice in terms of the length and the width. With a sleeping bag, because it's all enclosed, if you have some dead air, it's not too much of an issue. With a quilt, however, where it is not fully wrapping around your body, those dead air pockets can kind of leak to the outside, so you kind of burp the dead air and then get cold air in. So you want to avoid that, but you also don't want to be too small because then you'll get drafts. So follow the manufacturer's guidance. They'll tell you if you're a side sleeper or a back sleeper, if you move around a lot, here's what you might want to consider. And then the other thing with quilts is that there is no standard for rating temperature on quilts like there is for sleeping bags. And mainly I think that's because they don't have a hood. So instead, you need to look at the manufacturer's rating and other proxies for warmth, such as the amount of fill, the amount of down that is actually in the quilt, or looking at a target loft value. And so a target loft of about 2 inches is what most manufacturers say is good for a 30-degree quilt. I do want to warn you a little bit to beware of differences in manufacturers' temperature ratings when it comes to quilts. I've done a little bit of research here, and it's pretty interesting. You have some variety in how manufacturers will rate their quilts for the same amount of fill. And so most manufacturers kind of cluster in the middle here. Most of the five I looked at, the Hammock Gear, El Coyote, and Enlightened Equipment are all right down there in the middle. But for the same temperature rating, Z-Packs puts in the least fill and Katabatic Gear puts in the most fill, which basically means if you are looking at a particular temperature rating of quilt, that Z-Pack is going to be the coldest and that Katabatic Gear is going to be the warmest. So that's something to be aware of. Katabatic Gear in general also targets an extra 1/4 inch of loft versus every other manufacturer. And so their temperature ratings are more conservative, right? So they will have warmer quilts for the same temperature rating. So if you are, if you're trying to kind of push the boundary, you should pay attention to this when selecting your quilt. The other thing you can do to help yourself out is because the quilt does not have a hood, you can purchase and use a separate goose down hood that will increase the overall quilt warmth because it eliminates all that heat loss through your head. And it moves independently of the quilt. The weight penalty is pretty minimal. This works really well. I've been doing this for probably 8 years now, using a goose down hood and a separate quilt. And it's a very good system, more modular than a traditional mummy bag. So that's quilts. I see there are some things in the chat, but we'll get to questions at the end. I want to talk a little bit about sleeping bag technology as well, because that also has changed quite a bit in the past 5 to 10 years. The main advance that I've noticed in sleeping bag technology is the use of metallized film in the way that sleeping pads are constructed. So older pads used to use some kind of a synthetic fill that would expand like you would for a down or a sleeping bag, or you would for a jacket or something like that to fill the space inside the pad. But the metallized film technology is a little bit different. Basically uses a set of sheets of metallized heat reflective film and or TPU baffles within the sleeping pad to create a bunch of air chambers. And that will, they work together to radiate body heat back to your body and to limit air movement so that you don't have convection and conduction. What this means is that these newer pads have superior R value to pads even made 5 years ago or so, while reducing weight pretty substantially, as much as a half pound or more versus older style pads. So if your pad is older or colder, this might be something that you should look at for a worthwhile upgrade. I know of at least 4 companies that are specifically making some kind of a pad or multiple pads that are available with this film heat reflective film technology. Thermarest was the first of these, kind of infamous for its crinkly chip bag sound in the early generations of pads. But that problem has largely gone away with newer pads. They're much quieter, a little bit crinkly, but they're much quieter as they've refined the material selection. So you have Thermarest, Nemo, Big Agnes, and Ceta Summit are all offering this type of pad if you're in the market for one. All right, and then finally, let's talk about some trends in backpacks. So I think the first thing to say here is that backpacks should really be in the last thing on your list of things to upgrade. Once you have the rest of your gear dialed in, that's when you're going to look for a pack. What is a pack supposed to do for you? Transports all your stuff safely and comfortably. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background. And kind of what are the non-negotiables here? Again, fit is important, and it also has to be big enough to hold all your stuff. So this is why we look at packs last, because when you are reducing your gear weight, often you're also reducing your volume. And so once you know kind of what the total volume of stuff is that you're carrying, you may be able to go from a larger pack that you used originally to a lower volume pack. And just by virtue of it being smaller, that's going to save some weight right there. But if you buy the pack first and then all your gear doesn't fit, well, then you're kind of in trouble. So it is good to look at later in the process of optimizing your setup. So there's really two ways that you can get a lighter pack. One is what I just mentioned, getting a smaller pack. And then, excuse me, one moment. Hey, can you get the dog, please? My dog is barking a storm behind me. Okay, well, I hope he will stop in a minute. Hopefully you all can't hear him too badly.
Not to worry, we have dogs. We love dogs.
This one goes nuts anytime there's something happening in the front yard. All right. So I said 2 ways to get a lighter pack. The first one is to get a smaller pack. And that's the one I just mentioned, right? So a lower volume pack is going to be lighter. The second one is to get a simpler pack, and that's basically a pack with fewer features. And if you are looking to do that, then the kind of through hiking cottage gear brands that manufacture through hiking packs are really your friends. And so kind of what am I talking about there when I refer to that? Well, you can compare a traditional pack or a full featured pack on the left with a lightweight or a through hiking pack on the right. So really it comes down to differences in features. So that lightweight or through hiking pack really kind of strips down all of the features to just the bare minimum that are required to carry your stuff, right? So it doesn't have a separate lid or brain. Often it will not have as much ventilation. It's got a lighter weight frame. Typically some less padding. Instead of having multiple compartments with zippers, it's going to have one giant compartment and no zippers. It may have a little bit of a smaller volume, and then it's going to eliminate a lot of the straps and buckles for strapping things on the outside of your pack that you would see with a more traditional or full-featured pack. So with that elimination of features, obviously you do lose some convenience. A full-featured pack is typically quite comfortable and has lots of useful features. But the thing that you gain is that these lightweight packs, you might save 2 to 3 pounds off of the pack weight itself, just the weight of your pack. Now, with that, you have to be aware that these lighter weight packs are really optimized for 30 pounds or less, typically. And so if you are carrying more than that still, you may need to stick with a more robust regular pack. To kind of illustrate the extremes of this spectrum, these 2 packs that I'm actually showing here, on the left is Gregory Baltoro. It's a very popular full-featured pack. And on the right is a Durst and Cockwood 55. The left-hand pack is 4.7 pounds. The right-hand pack is 2 pounds, nothing ounces. So that's quite a bit of difference. Now, these are sort of the extremes of the spectrum. The good news for you is that there are lots of variations out there. I've just, put a handful on here. I think there's another half dozen small manufacturers that make these sorts of through hiking packs that I wasn't able to stick on here. And they have more or less features depending on what exactly you're looking for. So you can frequently find something that is in the range of the feature set that you're looking for while still reducing a lot of weight. Now, one thing about these, they're typically for purchase online only. So research the fit carefully before you purchase and research the return policy. Most of these manufacturers will have pretty generous return policies as long as you don't use it outside in the dirt. So, it's good to load it up at home, walk around your house, walk around your backyard maybe, and make sure that the fit's going to work before you commit. And then the other trend in packs is similar to the trend in tents, which is just that has been a revolution in lightweight and water-resistant fabrics. And again, it's these small brands that are using these kind of higher tech fabrics to reduce pack weight without sacrificing on kind of durability and that sort of thing. Of course, especially the DCF and the Ultra type packs, those are going to be on the more expensive end of the spectrum. But if you're looking for an economy pack, this Rovic nylon, it's been around a while, and Ultra Grid is fairly new. Those are both significantly less expensive, and you can get an economical pack in one of those fabrics that only weighs a few ounces more than a DCF or an Ultra pack. All right, so that is the trends in the big 4 items. And then just a little bit, I wanted to talk about kind of some principles of how to pack lighter, which you probably are somewhat aware of already, but this hopefully will provide a little bit of a framework for you. So the kind of 3 levels that you think about here, starting with the kind of 101 level of how to pack lighter, and that is simplify what you're bringing, right? Do you need a bowl and a larger bowl and a spoon and a spork, or can you get by with just a pot and a spoon? So simplify your gear loadout, and also don't pack your fears. This is something we really emphasize with our backpacking school students. They'll say, okay, man, I'm afraid of being cold. I don't want to be cold. So I'm going to bring 3 puffy jackets and a vest. And then you use one of those, right? So you don't want to be unsafe for sure. But you do want to pay attention to what you are packing and think about, am I just packing this because I'm afraid of something? And that'll help you reduce items that you don't really need or aren't going to use. And once you get to the intermediate stage, then you're looking at maybe multi-use items or repackaging, or specifically improving your skills. And so this is things like, hey, learn how to set up a trekking pole shelter. Knowledge weighs nothing. If you know how to set up a trekking pole shelter, you don't need a freestanding tent. You can use trekking pole shelter, and then it's going to be a lighter weight for you. And then there are other things, with stoves and whatnot that also fall into that category. And then once you've kind of got past those stages, now is where you should be thinking about maybe targeted weight saving upgrades, or doing one of those gear spreadsheets or gear planners where you weigh everything and kind of look at what's going to be the most bang for your buck, right? But don't go straight to that step. That's at the end of the how to pack lighter kind of skill chain here. And then these are also slides that we present to our backpacking school students, kind of the art of what not to bring. So when you're thinking about your stuff that you're taking with you, it's really in one of 3 categories. The first is it's a necessity. So this would be your 10 essentials, your shelter, your food, your water, right? These are things that you need to have. You may not use them like a first aid kit, but you do need to have it for safety. Second is it's a luxury. it's not necessary for the safety or the success of the trip, but I want to have it. It's desired for fun or comfort. Maybe it's a camera, maybe it's binoculars, maybe it's a sketchbook, you know, maybe it's a camp chair. Um, so, knowing what's a necessity versus a luxury is kind of important for you. And then the third category is it's not even a luxury, it's just excess. I didn't need this. I saw it someplace, I thought it'd be cool. I bought it, I brought it, I didn't use it. It was just heavy and taking up space in my pack. So learning what's a luxury versus excess is also an important thing. Because really what you're trying to do is bring all the necessities, don't bring anything that's excess. And then for those luxury items, you need to ask yourself, hey, for this trip, and it can differ for different trips, but for this particular trip, am I going to get enough use out of this for it to be worth the squeeze? So what's an example? I have a nice camera. I don't usually bring my nice camera on backpacking trips. It's kind of heavy. But I went to the Grand Canyon just a week ago, and I brought it for that trip because for there, that's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? To get great views and photographs. So it was important to me to have it along for that. And then I have kind of a flow chart that'll help you work through this as well. So this is my helpful flow chart if you still can't decide. It works best if you are analyzing a piece of gear that you took on a similar trip last time. And so it's just two questions. Did I use it last time? Yes or no? And do I need it for safety? Yes or no? And if you answered yes to either of those questions, you should bring it. And if you answered no to both, leave it behind. You probably are not going to miss it. And that concludes my presentation. I do have a set of resources here. These slides, I believe, will go out to anybody who would like to have them. So there's some useful websites down there at the bottom. And I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was excellent. And yes, we will be posting the slides and the recording on the BPX webpage. And we typically send it out with the newsletter as well. So fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. Uwe, do we have questions in the chat?
We have a couple. First is looking for a tip. I'm a turn sleeper. My bag rubs noisily against my mattress pad. Idea is to fix.
Okay. Yes, depending on what kind of bag you have. If you are using a quilt, then you could check into getting a sleeping bag liner. There are some very lightweight ones. I think I have a silk one. I don't know if it's still available, but I have a silk one from Rab that weighs 3 ounces. The sleeping bag liner, then you use it basically like a sheet. And if that's what's making contact with the mattress instead of your bag, then that can help to reduce the noise level. In terms of an actual sleeping bag on the mattress itself, if that's the interface that's making the noise, I don't have as many good ideas because I think Big Agnes does make like sheets that will go over your mattress or your sleeping pad. So you might try something like that. Adds a little bit of weight, and you get more use out of it if you're using a quilt. But I think that might help.
Okay.
And have they fixed the potato chip crunch? Yes, they have.
Okay. And a follow-up question is, have they fixed the potato chip crunch for the type of bags that you were showing with the radiation?
Yeah.
I'm talking about you bend down on it and the crunches.
Yeah, they still make some noise compared to your older style pads. I have a Nemo Tensor, probably 5 years old now. It's really not that noticeable. It'll make some noise if you're listening to it, but if there's any amount of wind or background noise, you don't really notice it at all. So fortunately for most of these, you can go to an REI, try them out, lay down on them, move around, see if the noise bothers you.
Okay, great. Let's see. Sarah M., did you want to share some of your opinions on backpacks? So that you have some strong on them. Oh, okay. Well, you didn't tell us the punchline, Sarah. Sarah says, "Oh, lots
Oh,
of like."
it's
I was
agreeing with my
agreeing with
dog.
Steve's
Yeah,
dog.
he's behind me on the chair
Doesn't
making a
have a mic.
racket.
That's a great joke. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
um, yeah.
So I have a question in terms of the ultralight. What are the lines today for? You have an ultraline, ultralight backpack system that's good for up to X pounds, and then if it's not, if it's heavier, it's medium light,
Um,
heavyweight. Where the
yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's any agreed upon standard for that. The numbers that I typically see if I, look around the internet are based on your base weight, because obviously what your total weight is depends on how much food and water you're carrying for how
sure.
long you're going. 10 pounds of base weight is what people consider the ultralight cutoff. The problem with that is, and this is also something we talk about in the backpacking class, a 10-pound base weight is incredibly difficult to achieve in Colorado if you are bringing things that are warm enough and protective enough for our mountain climate. You can get away with 10-pound base weight if you're doing the AT in Georgia and, you know, North and South Carolina in the middle of summer because it's very warm and you don't need all that extra warmth. But out here, it's pretty difficult to use. So kind of take that weight with a grain of salt. And I would say like 10 to 15 would be your lightweight range, and then like 15 plus would be your more traditional range.
Thank you. Okay, those are the questions in the
I
chat.
have a comment, not really a question, but we were talking about the material that some of the lightweight tents are made out of, and everyone talks about the weight, and they talk about the noise of the pads. So no one really talks about the noise that the tents make. So I have the Durston with Dyneema, and
Hmm.
I just want to warn people it's an extremely noisy tent if you're in a windy environment. So I was camping in Utah for many nights, and the wind, of course, comes down from the mountains at night. You've got a lot of wind around 4 o'clock, and then when you're going to bed at 9 o'clock or something, the noise is incredible with that Dyneema. So it was my first experience with it last year. I was not expecting that. And it took a while to go to sleep with this racket. So I don't know whether the other ones like the Polysil might be quieter, but just people should be aware Dyneema is incredibly noisy if you're in a windy environment.
The Dyneema is especially noisy if it's not broken in.
Ah,
Um,
new
yeah,
tent, that might be it, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But yes, you're correct. I don't own any Dyneema tents, so I can't comment on that too much. But yes, I believe the Sil Poly it's more of a conventional fabric. And I own Sil Poly and Sil Nylon tents, that was what the big fabric was before Sil Poly. Um, they're both very good tents, not loud. I
Okay.
think sorry, go ahead.
Another question. What is your backpack weight range for winter backpacking?
Ooh, that's a good question. The answer is I don't know because I started pulling a sled. um, and also I do almost all of my winter backpacking with my brother. And when we split the tent, we split some of the other gear. So I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I would guess in the 30 pounds of base weight range.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and that's if you're not doing ice climbing or mountaineering and have to carry crampons and rope and pro and
Right. That's just the camping. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why winter hut trips are great.
Steve, this material, the new materials are obviously very expensive, and you did say you could test them out with for some of these manufacturers. Do you have any experience with renting like a lightweight system from either Bentgate or REI? Because they do promote that you can do that. And I'm just wondering what exactly they will lend you or rent you. And is it a
Yeah.
good kind of pre-purchase program to do?
I think REI will rent its Flash series, um, which that may include their trekking pole shelter. Or go back, this Flash Air trekking pole shelter up in the middle here. I'm not sure. I think they also rent their Flash backpacks, which are some place in the middle of the range. It's got more features than like a true cottage gear pack, but fewer features than like a more traditional Osprey or Gregory pack would. Um, However, most of the rental places that I've seen are really renting more conventional gear. Um, I've not, especially for packs, I've not seen uh, or not noticed. If anybody knows differently, I think that would be helpful information because we would pass that on to our students as well.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Um, I think somebody asked about batteries. That was like a pre-question.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
and I did actually put, I do have a recommendation here, like I usually don't, but this is my recommendation for batteries. If you're looking for one, is go find something by Nitecore that's in the weight and feature range that you want. They've been making great battery banks for and headlamps for that matter for the backpacking community for something like a decade. Um, there are some other ones too that are newer that you can check out, but if you just want a straight up recommendation, go get a Nitecore battery bank. The one thing is make sure that it supports whatever kind of cable you have because they have several varieties. All right, other questions?
And feel free to unmute your audio if anybody wants to ask a question directly.
Another question came in. How much water do you recommend carrying?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. That is highly dependent on the trip type. So I mentioned I just went to the Grand Canyon. Coming out of the bottom of the Grand Canyon up from Phantom Ranch, we carried 4.5 liters. I would never carry 4.5 liters in almost anywhere in Colorado. In Colorado, you know, most places you go, you're gonna have a creek crossing every 5 miles or so, or a diversion to a lake or something like that, or you're camping at a lake, right? And so I typically will use 1.5 to 2 liters in Colorado, and I could get away with as little as a liter on a trip that was following a water source, but then you do have to stop pretty frequently and filter water. So I find that a liter and a half to 2 liters is pretty good for avoiding needing to filter during the day without carrying too much water weight. Again, that's for our climate and typical trips.
Yeah. And talking about water, I think it's going to be even more important this year to call ahead to the rangers and make sure there is a water source with the drought.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the water is stressed like everything else is. So, that trip I showed a photograph at the beginning of the Wind River Range. When we got there, the ranger failed to tell us there was a big outbreak of blue-green algae. So, we planned to carry very, very little water with us and just fill up of every lake. But we couldn't because there was so much blue-green algae. So, you had to really search for the inlet for the lakes. And then towards the end, we actually came across a ranger who told us do not drink the water because it's full of coliform bacteria. So it would be nice if they told us that ahead of time, which we did do some pre-calling. But I think this year, there's going to be even more issues like that with water sources. So just really good to call the rangers because normally they're very helpful.
I have another question. Do you use or not use water bladders in the winter?
I personally do not. If you do want to use a water bladder in the winter, the key thing is keep the tube from freezing. Usually you won't have a problem with the like water that's in the reservoir itself. The you keep tube from freezing either by blowing air back into the tube to push the water back into the reservoir, or using an insulated tube cover, and just making sure you're drinking out of it regularly. Um, I find them to be more trouble than they're worth in the wintertime, so I end up using a 40 below 1 liter bottle boot that I just put on my belt and store a liter of water there.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? Have we covered everything in the chat, Uwe?
Yes, hang on. I see a new. Let's see. I know people that bring a puffy and raincoat, and that's it. Sleep in their hiking clothes, no fleece or mid layer or long underwear. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, people do that. That's I think that gets into like knowing what's a necessity and what's a luxury item. If you're counting on your long underwear as part of your layering system for warmth, and so especially, it's good to know that the temperature ratings on a conventional sleeping bag are assuming that you are in long underwear when you're using the sleeping bag. And people don't necessarily always know that. So if you're relying on those things for part of your overall warmth, then it's a necessity for you. But otherwise, if you're just relying on them, stay clean and not feel gross in your sleeping bag, then it's more of a luxury item. Personally, I always wear separate sleep clothes. On the other hand, I'll go 4 days in the same shirt and pair of pants for the actual hiking portion of my day, because I know I've got something clean to switch into for sleeping.
Okay, well, that's everything. Looks like we have one more. Uwe, can you address that?
Oh, you bet. My favorite topic. Let's talk. Any recommendations for packing out solid waste? Or wag bags enough? And to add to that, my motto is don't bury, carry.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's becoming a requirement in more places as well. Um, I Yeah, there's a lot of personal preference here. The thing that I don't like with wag bags is that they're not as scent proof as you would like them to be. Um, and that becomes more of an issue the hotter it is outside. Um, so, I think that the main thing is just be mindful of where you're carrying it on your pack. Um, Probably others have more detailed
Uh,
opinions on that.
to add to that, I actually use my doggy bags and I double wrap them and then put them into double wrap a zip liner. Now I know that's kind of like against the ultra light, but that's kind of like where you're weighing, consequences and options.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely carry it if you can, because makes a lot of people leave their stuff and it just builds up and goes nowhere.
There's a thing called a poop tube too, which is basically a piece of PVC with a cap on both ends that people will carry on the back side of their pack. I think this is more common in the desert, especially places you're not supposed to bury, where you can start stuffing things down in the tube, cap the tube, um, and it just kind of keeps everything nice and contained and separate from the rest of your gear. Personally, I've never seen one of these in up close and personal, just in pictures of folks that have built them and used them. But if that's a frequent enough thing for you, you could take a look at that option.
Make sure you use pipe tape. They do leak.
Yeah, I would not count on that as your primary containment.
Just so you know.
Well, on that pleasant note, I think we'll draw to a close. So, Steve, thank you so much. That was amazing information. So, really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I know we'll see you on Saturday, and hopefully
Yes.
see everybody else as well. And the recording will be posted in due course. So let me just stop this now.